Traitor. That's what they shouted as she was pushed across the hot sand, her hands bound and her veil covering her face. The sun beat down mercilessly on the village, and the smell of smoke already filled the air. The stakes were driven in, the firewood piled high. A circle of people, eyes hungry for blind justice, circled the young woman like vultures. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply walked, her bare feet marking the dry ground with each step. "For dishonoring the blood of the tribe," an elder announced, his voice hoarse as the desert. A child hid his face. An old man spat on the ground, and she, Amina, only took a deep breath. The wind blew hard at that moment, kicking up dust as if the world itself were protesting. And in the midst of the tumult he appeared, a foreigner in uniform standing at a distance, his eyes fixed on her. He didn't understand the words, but what he saw, it was barbaric, and something inside him broke. The village was a handful of mud houses scattered among sun-baked hills. The cracked ground spewed dust with every step. Faded fabrics fluttered on the balconies, and the smell of dry earth mingled with the smoke wafting from the village center. Women covered their faces with thin cloths. Children ran barefoot, and men with long beards gathered around the fire, awaiting the cruel spectacle they called justice. It was just another morning, and in the tribal calendar, it was just another holy day. Another day when blood would be offered to honor. Amina was led to the clearing as tradition dictates, in silence. She had been accused of loving a foreigner, of dreaming of a world beyond the desert borders. Her father, ashamed, didn't hesitate to hand his own daughter over to the council of elders. "Better a dead daughter than a living disgrace," he said, looking at the ground as the sentence was read. Amina's clothes were dirty, but the white still tried to hold firm in the folds of the fabric. Sweat dripped down her forehead and her veil clung to her face as if to hide her shame from everyone but her own. She wasn't guilty. She had simply dared to love, and love, there, was a crime. Across the village, a small British detachment watched in silence. They had been sent to the region to protect interests, but they almost never interfered with local customs. It was the rule. Don't get involved. The commander, a cold and distant man, ignored the commotion. But among the soldiers, one couldn't look away. Thomas Whitaker, too young to be so far from home, stared at the scene as if witnessing a waking nightmare. The stories he'd heard about these executions seemed like legends, but there, before him, a girl was being burned alive for having loved, and everyone seemed to think it was normal. The fire was lit, the crowd fell silent, and Thomas's heart began to scream. Amina was not like the other girls in the village. She was always silent, but never submissive. Since childhood, she observed the world with sunken eyes, as if she knew she didn't belong on this cracked earth. She secretly read the books an old teacher had given her before he died, and dreamed of lands where women spoke without fear. She was tall, thin, and had a firm posture. She was proud of who she was, and that was what doomed her. His crime wasn't just loving, it was dreaming too loudly, too quietly. But still, they listened. "You could have kept quiet," a woman beside him murmured as she tied his hands. Amina just looked up at the sky. There would be no more silence after that day. Thomas Whitaker was a newly arrived soldier from Liverpool. He had grown up surrounded by storms and adventure novels. He enlisted young, driven by a sense of duty, and a secret desire to escape the monotony. Upon setting foot on foreign soil, he was warned, custom rules here. But what he saw that day struck a chord deep within him. He was blond, his face still youthful, but his gaze already marked by the contradictions of war. He was there, among hardened men, but he was different. He observed, he questioned, and he felt. That morning, when he saw Amina being taken to the center of the village, something in him broke. "What did she do?" he asked the local interpreter. "You dishonored the family. You will pay with fire." Thomas didn't answer. He just looked at the gathering crowd, the fire being prepared, and Amina's eyes, which met his for a moment. And in that instant, everything changed. Amina's father, a man with a dry face and dull eyes, stood among the elders. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. It was as if he had buried his daughter alive. "Shame must be burned away so that the village can be purified," he said aloud, as if repeating a lesson. And it was there, amidst the dust and smoke, that the stage was set. Two worlds about to collide. Two souls who did not yet know the price of courage. But time was running out, and the fire was already crackling. The sun was already high when they began piling more wood around the stake. The smell of dry wood mixed with dust formed a suffocating veil over the place. The elder raised his hands and pronounced the sentence in a hoarse, solemn voice, like a priest about to sacrifice a lamb. But Amina was no lamb. She was a young woman who still carried in her eyes the spark of someone she had loved, even though she knew it could kill her. Thomas felt his hands sweat through his gloves. He was breathing quickly. This wasn't his people. This wasn't his culture, but it was a life, a living woman about to be burned for something that, in her country, wasn't even a crime. The other soldiers talked among themselves, indifferent. "Don't get mixed up in this, boy," said the sergeant, chewing tobacco. "You don't understand. This is ancient. They solve things their way." But Thomas couldn't accept it. Not after looking into her eyes. Not after feeling the terror hidden behind that veil. Amina, even bound, remained erect. She didn't beg, but inside fear grew like a wildfire. The sound of children being driven away, the clanging of sacred metals, the screams of fanatics clamoring for purification. Every detail pierced her chest like a needle. What if you just closed your eyes? What if you accepted your fate? But what if, somehow, there was salvation? Thomas walked away from the group and toward the interpreter. "Can I talk to her?" "Talk to her? Will you get infected too? Just take me to her, quickly." The interpreter hesitated, but walked with him to the stone-marked area, the circle where the condemned were left before the ritual. Amina looked up when she saw the soldier approaching. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all. Thomas knelt beside her. "I can't allow that." The interpreter translated with trepidation. She just replied, "Then you will die with me." On the other side, the drums started. It was the signal. The elder began to sing songs. The people repeated them in chorus. Thomas stood up. His classmates watched him, puzzled. "Whitaker, come back here!" the sergeant shouted. But he didn't come back. The dilemmas multiplied in his mind. What if it interfered? It could cause a diplomatic incident. What if I did nothing? He could never live with himself. The crowd parted as he passed, a foreigner daring to break an age-old cycle. "Stop!" he shouted, his voice swallowed by the hot wind. "Nothing. Stop." Now in Arabic, learned silently during months of service. And this time, silence fell. The tension was palpable. One of the elders' hands paused inches from the fire. Everyone turned to the soldier in the sweaty uniform, eyes blazing. "She won't die today. This ritual is sacred," a man shouted. "And murder is also?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Amina looked at him, surprised, and for the first time with hope. But hope was dangerous there too. From the bottom, someone threw a stone. It passed close by. "Get out of here, you dog of the West." But Thomas stayed. I had chosen, and I wouldn't go back. The silence after Thomas's scream was like an abyss. Tense, immense, filled with held breaths. Not a leaf stirred, not a bird sang. Only the crackling of dry wood, which was already beginning to lick small flames beside the stake. The elder, with the hard look of someone who has condemned many to the fire, raised the ceremonial staff. "Stranger, if you touch her, you touch all of us, and you won't come out alive." Thomas swallowed hard. The rifle was still strapped to his back, but his hands were bare before the crowd. He wasn't a soldier now. He was just a man trying to do what was right. He took another step forward. "This woman did not commit a crime." "You dishonored your blood," replied one of the leaders. "She is a human being, and loving is not a sin." The words echoed like muffled thunder. The British soldiers in the distance began to approach slowly, hesitantly, but no one dared intervene directly. It was Thomas against everyone. Amina, still trapped, couldn't understand why anyone would risk so much. Her eyes were wet now, but not from fear, from disbelief. She had been abandoned by everyone, family, friends, neighbors, and here he was, a stranger who had known her for minutes and had already chosen to die for her. Thomas took off his helmet. He dropped his rifle on the ground. "If she dies, I die with her." And without waiting for permission, he broke through the stone circle and entered the sacred area. The crowd screamed. Some backed away. Others raised sticks, but no one moved. He knelt beside Amina and forcefully ripped the ropes binding her hands. She stared at him, speechless. "Come with me," he said, in shaky but sincere Arabic. Before anyone could react, Thomas stood up and lifted her with him. They stood side by side, facing an entire bloodthirsty village. And then the unexpected. An elderly woman shouted from the back, "She's just a girl." Then another, "What kind of faith burns the living?" Voices began to scatter like sparks in hay. "The foreigner is right. Enough." But not everyone agreed. A young warrior, inflamed, rushed to attack them with a short blade. Thomas pushed Amina back and raised his arms. The blow came and missed. One of the British soldiers, who had sneaked up on him, knocked the attacker down with the butt of his rifle. "Captain's orders," he said. "No one else dies today." Confusion ensued. Shouting, running, heated arguments. But Amina and Thomas were already being escorted out of the clearing, protected by a small group of soldiers. In the distance, the old man watched them. He said nothing. He simply turned the staff in his hands, as if recognizing a lost battle. As they crossed the village line, Amina fell to her knees in tears. Thomas knelt beside her. "You're free now," he whispered. But they both knew freedom has a price, and that moment was just the beginning. The path they left behind was marked by footprints in the dust and silences as heavy as the sky before a storm. Amina walked slowly, still dizzy from everything that had happened. Her wrists bore the marks of the ropes, but within her something new was being born, something that still had no name. Freedom, relief, fear, it was all mixed together, like a knot in her chest that only time could untie. Thomas walked alongside, watching every movement. He had defied orders, tradition, and logic. He knew he would face consequences, perhaps a court-martial, perhaps expulsion. But at that moment, none of that mattered. He had saved a life, and it, for some reason he didn't yet understand, had saved his too. They were taken to the small military outpost nearby. There, Amina received medical care, food, and clean clothes. For the first time in days, she slept without hearing death chants. Thomas, meanwhile, was interrogated. They called him insubordinate, a fool, a traitor to protocol, but they also called him a man, a human. That night he sat by the campfire and gazed up at the starry desert sky. Amina came over and sat beside him in silence. They sat there, silent, listening only to the distant sound of the wind cutting through the dunes. "Do you think we did the right thing?" he asked, looking into the fire. She took a deep breath. "If you hadn't shown up, I wouldn't be here to believe in anything." He smiled. For the first time since arriving in that country, he felt he had found a purpose not written in any official order. But not everyone slept peacefully that night. In the village, some revolted against the escape. They burned houses. They arrested innocent people. They swore revenge. Tradition had been violated, and for many, this was unforgivable. Amina's father, humiliated in front of the village, was deposed from the council. But he didn't say a word. He just sat there, staring at the embers of what had once been the sacrificial altar. "My daughter died that day," he said to a young man. "What came back is no longer mine." Meanwhile, at the military post, Thomas and Amina began to plan their next move. "I can't stay here," she said. "Neither do I. But we can leave. Find a place where we won't be remembered for what we did, but for who we are." She looked at him. "What if they come after us? Then we run. Together." The camera slowly pulls back. The desert stretches out like an endless sea. Two figures walk toward the horizon, their steps slow but steady. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is to defy the world on behalf of a stranger. Sometimes love is not born of words, but of courage. What about you? Would you have risked everything for someone you didn't even know? Comment below if you believe justice should trump tradition. Days later, an intercepted message changed everything. Amina's name was on a list. Someone was hunting her, and what they were willing to do was even darker.